Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Goodest cast. And on this episode, we have Joel Hedges of C's Garage. You guys have been asking for this one forever, since day one. Finally got him in person, in the studio. Joel's an amazing driver. Him and his brother built some of the coolest cars on the planet, and they shred. We get to talk about the origin stories of C's Garage, being an entrepreneur in New Zealand, the driving scene, him living in Japan with Jesse Streeter in the early days. It's a great episode. He's super eloquent. I'm happy we got to do this in person. Joel Hedges of C's Garage. Check it out. Goodest cast. Roll it. Welcome to Southern California.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Pulled up in the sickest camper of all time.
Yeah, I've been on the road for 3 weeks, I think, coming to the end of our trip. So I'm glad this lined up.
Yeah, it was cool. You got to check out Super D NYE.
Yeah. We flew over for Christmas and New Year's and got to, obviously Super D was on at the same time. Getting to see all you boys drive in real life, was a pretty sick thing to do. I don't know. Instagram, the internet's weird. You feel like you're there kind of half the time, but actually seeing the cars in real life and getting to meet, I don't know, some of the boys that I've only ever kind of chatted to through Instagram was pretty damn cool. And seeing you boys throw down was sick too. And Thunderhill's insane.
Yeah.
As a track and all those different options. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I can say the same for coming to Hampton Downs and seeing you guys drive in person. It's like, okay, this is. I did not get the full experience. That track doesn't look as fast as it is
Hampton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Passenger, doing the big entry on that is even just riding in the car is shit. This is wild.
Yeah, it's one gear up, top of fourth. Yeah, it doesn't come across in videos, but I don't know. Just seeing people at their home tracks is sick, Yeah. Been driving that, doing lap after lap after lap of the same track for years. It's a pretty cool thing to go watch. So,
is this the first? Was that the first time you've kind of done any drifting stuff in the U.S.? Because I know you've been over here kind of more on vacation and surfing and
that was the first drifting we've seen. So we came over. We've been over a few times. I should probably tell the story about the camper at some point, but most of it's just been surfing down the coast, which has been cool, and catching up with people. We caught up with Julian. We went out to his place, and actually getting to hang and not do drift stuff was pretty cool too.
It's always nice.
Yeah, but that was the first drift event, US drift event we've been to, and I feel like it was a pretty cool one to go to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I had a really good time, and just I don't know, I get a little bit confused with what tracks in the US are what, because it's such a big, you follow so many people, and there's such a big country, and there's so many tracks. I'm kind of which one's Thunderhill? Which corner is that? I've seen a video of that at some point, but being there, it was I don't know, it kind of blew my mind. If that's what a lot of American tracks are like, then you guys are pretty damn lucky, because even just having a skid pad of that size to be able to set up any layout, you could fit any Japanese track onto that skid pad.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I don't know, not many countries have that kind of thing, so that was pretty sick.
Yeah, the Thunderhill skid pad is a special place.
Yeah, it's cool. Most people think skid pad's a skid pad, but when it's that big and you can get well into third gear, it's pretty sick.
Yeah, and it's surrounded by concrete.
Yeah.
It can get pretty gnarly. Yeah,
it was a good time. It was fun.
I usually start out the podcast talking about how I discovered you. I talked about it a few times, but the early days of Tumblr, scrolling through, you and your brother's car were pretty predominantly featured on many Tumblr accounts in that era.
The slam days.
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking about it because I knew obviously we were going to come have a chat, and I was been thinking about where it all started and stuff. And I feel those early days, everyone always talks about the glory days.
Yeah.
I feel that pre-Instagram, forum era, like Tumblr, like that was pretty peak drifting. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Like having to discover like people's blogs, like that was like a pretty fun time for drifting, I feel like.
Yeah, it was like you guys, Nigel.
Yeah.
Uh,
It was like Risky Devil.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and then
that era.
obviously like a whole bunch of like pretty rad people in the States doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
BH World.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a bunch of those old blogs that's kind of, yeah, where it started. I feel like that's where everyone kind of like discovered each other in that era, like through blogs and stuff like that. So
It was such a small community back then.
that was cool. Like being, I don't know, I can't remember what it was called. I think it was Google Reader. Did you ever have that?
Mm-hmm.
And you'd like refresh your Google Reader for the day, and like the new blog posts from all the different blogs would pop up, and you're like, shit, Nigel's just like put TEs on his 180. And it's like, I don't know, everything seemed like such a big deal back then. Now, obviously, Instagram, YouTube's like really saturated, everything.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to like blow up the internet these days, but back then it felt like a simpler time,
Yeah. Like, oh, I got new wheels.
Yeah, literally.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like this dude, like 15-hour flight away from us, just like changed his body kit, and it's like sick for me in New Zealand, So yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah, I miss those days.
Tell me about the early days of C's Garage.
Do you want to go like right back to when we got into cars, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm a little brother, so my older brother Adam is kind of what got me into cars. And I don't know, when you're a little brother, like whatever your older brother does, like you just, I don't know, you want to do it, and you want to do it better than they've done it. It's like your goal in life. And probably my earliest memory of like getting into cars was, I've always kind of like liked cars, but I remember when I was about 15, just about to like talking to my brother about what like we should get as a first car. He had a little 2-door KP Starlet, like a little rear-wheel drive 80s little thing, and I think it had like a 3K engine or something in it. And I remember I was laying on the couch. This is probably my earliest memory of like pricking my ears and being like, cars are sick. We had this old newspaper back in the day, like before like eBay and like online auctions. There was like a newspaper that you used to like ring up and put your like.
It just said
like
blue Chevelle,
literally
90 or like 67.
Yeah, like you had 2 lines to describe your whole car.
Yeah.
He like saw like rally 4K engine or something, and he'd told me he'd bought this like rally spec engine with like a big cam in it and stuff. And I was laying he'd gone to pick it up with his mate, and he turned up, and I like looked at it, and I'm like, it's like some greasy old engine. And I was like laying on the couch, and within like 3 hours, he'd swapped it in and started it, because it's like carbureted, like it's a tiny little Starlet. It's like pretty easy to work on. He'd swapped it in and started it up, and it was just sitting there idling, like with like a lumpy cam. And I was just like, kind of like sitting on the couch, looked over, and I was like, that's kind of sick, especially that he could just like do that in 3 hours. And that Starlet really got us into, I guess, having like a rear-wheel drive car, him being like young and kind of like a shithead and doing skids and breaking axles and welding diffs and all that kind of thing. Kind of when I was talking to him about getting a first car, like Sylvia's back in that day, like I was saying, the glory days, like you could pick one up for 2,000 New Zealand dollars, which is like at the moment like around 1,000 US. So we were looking at cars to buy, and Sylvia was like kind of, I don't know, drifting was this thing back then. So I would have been 16. This would have been about 2000. Like drifting had just kind of was getting traction in New Zealand, like in terms of there was just starting to be regular drift days. There was an organized competition, D1NZ, which I think like had been going since around 2004, which is pretty early for drifting, for like an organized series. And I remember we were trying to think about what car to buy. Sylvia was on like high on that list. We also had like a like a old Civic with a V16A. It was like kind
Cool.
of like didn't know which direction to go in.
Yeah.
So we decided to go watch some drifting, and we went to Pukekohe, which was our local track, about an hour from where we live. And you can't drift there anymore. They closed it down. But back then, that was like New Zealand's home of drifting. Has one sick corner, which they call the sweeper, which is like top of well into fifth gear. So it's like 180 Ks, like, and more if you're being manly. And I remember walking over the hill, never seen drifting before, and just like walking over the hill and someone entering. There was an old guy back then called like G Much that had a big RB Laurel, and he flicked into the sweeper, and I was just like that was it for like both me and Adam seeing it in person at the same time. Ever since then, we were just like, screw it, we want to drift. Like, we're going to drift. So I picked up a S13 two-tone SR20 DE manual for like just over $2,000. It's like clean, not a dent on it, no mods. Like now, if you saw that thing, it would be like a relic. Me and Adam quickly started having fun with that. And like, there was no, back then, I don't know, there was no recipe. You couldn't just like search. There wasn't any easy way to figure out the recipe of what to do to a car. So you were like asking people, like literally like creating forum posts and being like, what do people do with their toe in the rear? Or like, is this a good coilover? Like, what does it mean if, like, which arm should I buy for the car? So it was all pretty new to us, and I felt like pretty new to like the internet in general back then, drifting. And after I got the Sylvia, we started messing around with it, did some stupid stuff that I probably won't talk about on here. Painted it satin black at one point. Adam, obviously being the older brother and him like putting in all the work into that, got like sick of the Starlet and was like, well, I want something I can drift too. And he started looking at turbo like Type X's and S14s. And there was just on our local Trade Me, I think it was Trade Me, which is like your eBay. There was a purple Type X, completely stock. Had the lip, had the side skirts, had everything. Had the carbon rear like centerpiece between the tail lights, and it was midnight purple. And it was on there for ages, and like I kept saying to Adam, like, let's go look at that purple one. And he's like, nah, it's purple. Like, I don't want a purple car. And I was just like, dude, that color would be sick, like in real life. Like it might not look good in photos, but I reckon in real life it would be good. And just so happened when we turned up to look at it that day, it was sunny, and like it had like
that color's so good.
Yeah, there's like a lot of red in that early midnight purple. And he saw it and he's just like, yeah, I'm getting it. And then he bought that, and then he had a turbo car, and then I'm like, we felt like a turbo SR for the first time. I'm just like, I don't know, felt like a rocket ship back then, like a stock turbo SR, stock airbox, everything. And that just kind of like snowballed from there. We both had Sylvias, and I guess at that point in time, we both knew we wanted to drift. But so this will be 2007, I think. And we both were kind of, I would say, like looking for like what direction like to go in with the cars.
Yeah. What do you want to do? Was it back then there was only like a couple options?
And it was hard to discover what those options were. And I think like this might surprise a few people, because a lot of people will probably think like Japanese drifting kind of sucked us in straight away. But there was a forum back then called Ziptide. And it was pretty crack up. It was like, for people that haven't heard about it, it was kind of like a drifting forum that was about everything but drifting. But drifting was like a sideshow of the forum. And you had to be invited to it to get full access. You could go on it like as like a viewer and just get like as a guest and just get like some of the forum access. And it was like pretty sick, like watch some of the build threads and stuff like that. And there was Zip Tide kind of grabbed our interest. There were like 2 cars in particular on there. There was Matt Powers S14.
Mm-hmm.
Back then it was like the era of like green, purple bonnet, like slammed on gold VSXXs.
Yep.
That car, and a guy called Tommy Roberts, which was one of Matt's friends.
Yep.
He had a 1V, like gold, slammed on like 3-piece wheels. And those 2 cars just like straight away, I was just like, dude, like you can make a Sylvia look like that? That's insane. And it drifts. Like, so that kind of got us stuck in that direction. And those guys were like the early, like Tommy's car is the reason why mine went 1V. Like,
Interesting.
like mine had a Sylvia front,
Interesting.
and then his was 1V. And I was like, shit, like all the Sylvias in New Zealand, all the S13s in New Zealand are Sylvia front. Like you guys get the 1V stock, but for us, that's not a common thing. So I was like, man, that's pretty sick. His car's sick. I want to be like Tommy. I'm going to put a 180 front on.
Tommy's cars live rent free in my head.
Yeah. They still do now. Like even now, like that car's still so sick. Shout out to Tommy if he's listening at all. I've never met him, but I hope to one day.
He's not far away.
Really?
Yeah, he's in San Diego.
So yeah, well we're heading down that way, and we hope to meet up with Matt again. So like hopefully meet up with Tommy.
Yeah, we could probably set that up.
Yeah.
You should reach out. I'm sure he'd be very happy.
That'd be sick.
Gathering of the minds.
Yeah. Oh, he still drifts it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is sick.
Yeah, he's got that like 2J IS 250, and then he's like always building an S chassis randomly, and then
yeah, that'd be super sick. But from there, both having Sylvias, it was really exciting. Like, I don't know, finding Japanese parts in New Zealand at that time was pretty hard to do too. Like a lot of people, you had to kind of import them if you wanted something cool. Like you couldn't just jump on Facebook Marketplace like you can now and like search
find wheels
TE37 and there's like a 6 set of TEs sitting on there. Like that wasn't really a thing. So we figured out pretty early that there were guys, Kiwis or Aussies living in Japan that were willing to send you, you could buy stuff off Yahoo and they would send it to New Zealand. And keeping on the Zip Tide subject, there was this thread on Zip Tide. This is like the definitive moment in my drifting, like adolescence, I guess. There's a thread on Zip Tide called the 2001 photo definition. Like that was the subject name.
Mm-hmm.
And all it was all the guys on Zip Tide posting like sick magazine scans and like VHS rips of Video Option and Dory 10, like the peak cars from around the 2001 era. And like, I think that's, like to this day, I still think that's like when drifting peaked in style. Like that's still what that's like Haraguchi's FC.
Yeah.
That's like Abu Moon Skylines. That's all the BN Sports, like promo cars.
Yeah.
Those were all around that 2001 era. All the D1 GP cars of that 2001 era, like Uios X6, like just like, I don't know. To this day, that's what we're trying to build. Like we haven't come very far at all. We're just still trying to build cars that look like those cars did.
Yeah.
And once we discovered that, so like Matt and Tommy's cars sucked us into that kind of like slammed big wheel, like Japanese vibe. So that kind of set us off in that direction. And then 2001 photo definition, literally I just right click saved as every single freaking photo from that forum. It was like hundreds of pages that post long. And
do you still have that folder?
I don't think I do. I think that hard drive died a long time ago. But most of that stuff's on Instagram now, which is pretty cool. I rate that's still around. But that forum post, like subject or whatever you call it, like that shaped our early days of drifting. Like from there on, it was like Matt and Tommy took us in that direction, and then early Dory 10, early D1 GP took us in that whole other direction. And I was just like, I need big kit slammed to the ground. I need like the sickest stickers and the car has to sound a certain way and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of the early days of us getting into it. And like I said earlier, from there, like back then, a blog was kind of the cool thing to do. And like the Risky Devil guys were doing it. I think when we started the C's Garage blog, I think Nigel was already doing it. Maybe, I can't remember, it so long ago. But yeah, it was just like a cool kind of outlet to, I don't know, kind of like diary what we were doing, because we didn't know what we were doing. Like, tried to cut and weld axles shorter so we could have shorter lower arms to fit bigger wheels, and like just like stupid stuff that you do when you're getting into cars, you know. But I'm glad we did start the blog that early on, because those blog days didn't last that long. And I feel like to this day starting that blog still like put us in touch with like a lot of the people that we hang out with in drifting today, which is pretty sick.
It's awesome. Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm here to tell you about my favorite tire supplier. And if you guessed, it's definitely Tire Streets. And if you listened to the podcast before, you already knew that. But if you're new, welcome. Let me tell you about Tire Streets. They got tires for everything. They carry Accelera. They got Vitor. They got Armstrong. They got other stuff that I can't remember right now. If you want a discount on any of it, click the link in the description. And if you want that hot fire discount during checkout at Goodest 651 for even more savings, get over there, get yourself some tires, get your friends some tires, get your parents some tires. If you're on cords on your daily, head over to Tire Streets, get yourself something nice and cheap, get yourself to work safely. And if the drift car needs a setup, and this ad sucks. Tire Streets, your brother, he builds incredible stuff. Like going out there for the animal style GP, just seeing his like workshop and the stuff that he does, and your guys' like engine bays, and everything has its place. I don't know. Has he always been that meticulous?
Yeah, like I don't know. He's definitely grown in terms of like everyone does. You know, your welding gets better. You get more money, so you can buy more AN and you can do everything more perfectly. But yeah, ever since the start, he's always been trying to do everything like as well as we possibly can. So whether it's like doing an engine swap and like actually doing it properly, or I remember back in the day we were like painting body kits, and he'd make me like, I say make me, but like we would prime them, and then we'd have to wet sand the primer, and then we'd like, you know, like there was like 5 different levels to painting a body kit back then, just because we wanted it to be glass. And it turned out like
Perfect.
He's painting it outside or in like our parents' garage or something, and it turns out like flat and perfect looking. So yeah, it's been, our mates nicknamed him. We had a bunch of mates that drifted back then, like in those early days, and they all had super sick cars, and that was all probably because of Adam. And they all nicknamed him the Wizard. Like, and I think a lot of people still call him a wizard to this day. In terms of his garage, like he and our cars look like they do, and they drive like they do, and they run like they do because of him. Like I don't know, he's the hands behind it, and it's pretty sick. I've been pretty lucky to have like an older brother that is really talented and like driven in that way, because I don't know, it sounds weird, but it's a pretty daunting thing to try and like do things to your best ability, and then your brother's just like, let me take a photo of that and chuck it on the internet, you know. Like, it's like I didn't think about that up until recently, but it must have been a bit of a daunting thing for him.
Especially because he's so particular. Like, is he unhappy with things that most people would be like ecstatic about?
Yeah. Like, he'll often finish something and like, I don't know, he'll weld up some meticulous piping or something, and I'll be like, dude, that's sick. And you can just see the look in his eyes where he's like done one thing slightly wrong, or he can already see him redesigning the shape, and like, but yeah, to this day, I think he's got a lot more like satisfied with what he's doing. And you can see like you said, the engine bays and the work that he puts out is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I watched him. It's like cool to watch him work on stuff. But the thing that blew my mind was Michael D Magic did delivery for your shop car when we came out there.
Yeah.
And the bottom lip of the graphic was like a little too tall, and Michael was bothered by it enough to say something. And Adam just goes over there and like with a razor blade cuts the perfect line around the entire car. And I'm like, like the level of talent it takes to like eyeball that. And he did it in like 10 minutes, like maybe 15. But it was like, I could never do that. If someone was like, I'll give you $10,000 if you can line this up perfectly around the car, no shot.
Yeah.
Like no shot. It'll take me like days, you know?
He's weirdly talented at lots of things, I think. It all comes down to the same thing, though. I think he's like really patient, and like he has that kind of level of patience that you need to do something really well, you know? Like, I don't know. You get to the point where, like, let's say for that, you'd be cutting the line and you'd make like a slight mistake and you'd be like, fuck it. And you just like riff around the rest of it and completely ruin the car. But I don't know, he's got that patience and that like care that, I don't know, he does in terms of our cars. Like, I think the only time they've ever been worked on like externally by someone else is the tuning. So Adam's done the wiring, the paint, like
it's crazy.
We get Ash and Michael helped with the shop car, but Ash from Hero Prints helps. We like do the liveries together, and Ash like we've had people stick stickers on in the past, but like a lot of the time we'll do the stickers ourselves, and it's always the same thing. Like Adam's always leading the charge with all that stuff because he's just like meticulous. Meticulous is probably the good word for it, which is weird to have for a drift car because like you're spending all that time making something look so sick, and then you're like, I'm gonna go either crash into a wall or crash into my brother, like, which is just as bad because you're essentially breaking two cars.
I remember looking at your cars in New Zealand and being like, I hope they never come to the States and look at our engine
Oh, dude, your cars are nice though.
Yeah, I guess it's always like easier to spot all the flaws when it's your own car.
Yeah. No, I was super impressed. It's weird with that Instagram thing. Like you look at cars on the internet for so long, you think you've seen them before, but actually seeing your cars in real life, like your car, Aaron's car is like pretty wild to look at. Like
there's so much detail.
Yeah, and it's like really good style. Like I was pretty hyped to see that. So.
He's incredible.
Yeah,
like his dedication to, I don't know, but I think there's some. He just does not stop either. Like he's always like, I'm gonna do this next. And like he has
you
like
can kind of see that like suicide doors, and then like the inside of the doors are like designed and like done. It's like kind of like what's next, and it just makes the car like that's what you need for a drift car, you know. Yeah. A lot of people don't have that these days, but I think that's what a lot of the old drift cars were, you know. Like people just trying to one up each other and like make it sicker.
I think he has the coolest drift car in the U.S.
Yeah,
I tell him that all the time. He won't like accept it, but it's ridiculous.
I rate that car highly. There's a lot of good style in that car.
Yeah. I want to talk about when I came to watch you guys drive. I was like blown away. I saw I feel like Animal Style and like C's Garage kind of one follows the other. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird.
You guys kind of like you guys might be a little ahead of us. I'm not gonna lie. I think like you guys had some really incredible cars, slam, street style, awesome wheel fitment, like perfectly executed. And then one day the suspension geometry is completely different and you guys are absolutely throwing. I mean, you guys always drove really well, but we're seeing like these insane entries and kind of like the driving change. I know you drove in Japan for a while and I'm just wondering what the like inspiration was and how that all came to be.
Yeah, I think definitely Animal Style and like what we did with C's followed the same path 100%. Like I would say that you guys were a big inspiration, like Julian's car and Ryan. Julian and Ryan for us were like a pretty big inspiration back in the day, which is cool because like now we can be buddies and like, you know, like hang out. But like back then being from the other side of the world, seeing like those cars they were pretty peak style. Like to this day, I still think Julian's S13, when it had the livery with the like realistic flames on the side
So
skirts,
good.
to this day, I still think that's like one of the best drift cars ever made. Like
Same.
that's like in my top 5.
Yep.
But yeah, we definitely kind of followed that same, like really inspired by early 2000s slammed stylish drift cars. And like I both think like we put a lot of like both Animal Style and me and Adam put like a lot of focus on making sure that our cars like look the part. And I probably I'll probably disagree and say that we didn't drive good back then. Like we drove like okay for having a slam car, but Adam probably drove good, but I was rubbish for like a long time. Like I didn't really pick up on drifting like Adam did. I was always like the little brother, kind of like chasing the older brother. Like he just got in a drift car and could drive. I kind of like struggled through like 5 drift days, just kind of sucked. Like still trying to figure it all out. But yeah, being a younger brother, I was like, how do you get good at driving? Like maybe go to Japan and learn to drive. But there's a bit of a story behind that first Japan trip. Like obviously being a drifter, you look to Japan so much for inspiration. And I was like just finishing up high school, just starting university. I did like a Bachelor of Business. I was 1 year into that. And we were sitting around with some buddies. One of them was Chris Kane from B110, which was like an early blog. And he had these old Datsuns, hence the name B110. But he took all our photos back in the day. Like he was like the only guy that was taking photos of our cars. So like all that early stuff on the blogs, all the drift days from the blogs. Like I think we got on Speed Hunters back then when it was like a big deal. That was all Chris taking photos, which was pretty sick. And he was just a buddy from school, like played rugby with him, surfed with him. Like it was pretty cool to have someone alongside us like that. But we decided to go on a Japan trip, and just so happened that Adam had decided to build a S14, and instead of buy one in New Zealand, he decided to buy one in Japan with all the right bits, ship it to New Zealand, pull all the bits off he didn't want, sell them, and then build that shell. The timing lined up, and the guy that was buying it for us was a guy called Ewan. He actually runs Stacked now, Kiwi guy. And he was a massive help in the early days. Like he was who we were getting all our parts from. And we kind of just sent him an email and we're like, look, before you ship Adam's S14 to New Zealand, can we go to a couple tracks? Like, can you take us to a couple tracks? Which he did. He was running a part exports business. Like he could have just been like, hell no. No, like this is not profitable for me at all. But he was a legend and he's like, yeah, for sure. And me, Chris, and another buddy flew over, and Adam obviously let me drive the car, and with like one provisor, like if I ruin it, then I have to buy him another one. I don't even know if he said that specifically, but he probably should have.
And you're like, I'll take that risk.
Yeah, I was like, I'll just go drive my brother's car. And I was like, fresh out of high school, like no money, like there's no chance I'm buying like a turbo car in Japan. Like even though they were cheap back then, like that was like mind blowing. So it all just lined up perfectly. And Ewan took like us, like literally let us stay at his house and like took us to these like 3 tracks. I think we drifted Zuka Twin, Mayhan, and
Seacourse.
Yeah. And
it's a good place to test out a car.
Yeah, I can't remember if we did do Mayhan on that first trip. I'm pretty sure we did. And Mikawa Sportsland, which was like a track that we didn't even really know of back then. Ewan was just like, you could drive this other track. And we were like, cool, let's go. And through that trip, we got to experience Japan for the first time. We also got to experience like driving in Japan, which was something back then. It seems really commonplace these days.
Yeah.
For people to like, it seems a lot easier these days to be able to buy a car in Japan, fly over, do like a drift holiday, you know, like or rent a car. Back then there was nothing like that. So it was a pretty unique like series of events to align for us to be like in Japan drifting. Like it would have been like 18 years old or 19 years old, which was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And then went to Zuka Twin, got to meet like a lot of people that we looked up to. One of them was Jesse Streeter. He back then was just like this drifting myth, like this mythical guy that lived in Japan and drove super hard on the street and drifted Meihan super hard and was kind of just known as like, I don't know, one of the only foreign guys over there that was like living the drift life like properly.
He's definitely a big inspiration for me.
Yeah. And
All
still
his
is.
early stuff, like I found Jesse Streeter videos like before I even knew what an S13 was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like having the last name Streeter and like him,
Yeah.
like I always thought it was an alias or something.
I did too.
But we met him, and I think the first question I asked him, I'm like, "Is that your real name?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course it is." Like, and then
Why would you ask?
Yeah, and when you meet Jesse, he's like completely like that. He's just like, "Yeah, that's my name." And we must have drifted Meihan because I'm pretty sure it was at Meihan he mentioned, or at Zuka Twin, he said, like, I said I love Japan, like I could live here, and he was like, "I've got a room at my house." It was just like a passing comment. And it kind of like rung in my head the whole rest of the trip.
I could live here.
Yeah. And then at that Zuka Twin day, I'm like was drifting with Jesse, thought I was like the man, could like kind of keep up with him a bit in tandem, and ended up like overdoing it on a lap and just like barreling the car into some tires. And behind the tires was like a concrete bollard thing at Twin because we were running reverse direction, which is kind of like the fast flick into the wall.
Yeah.
Overcooked it and just demolished the back of the car. Like the right side of the boot, like touching the left side of the boot. I was just like, got out of the car, walked around the back. And back then, like the drift days were packed. So it was like a full blown packed Suzuka Twin drift day. And I just like walked around the back of the car, looked at it. And I like to rip the Band-Aid off things when I get really scared. So I just called Adam, like standing behind the car, and just told him what I'd done. So basically like little brother ringing big brother being like, "Dude, I just wrote your car off."
Uh-huh.
And he's like, "Fuck, you'll have to buy me another shell." And I don't think I ever bought him a shell. Like to this day, I think he just went out and bought his own shell. Like he's done some pretty solid stuff for me, just being the little shithead brother.
What a fucking legend.
He's a G. Like he's such a good dude, and he's a nice brother to have. But I got back to NZ after that trip, had like the hell time, and just I was halfway through uni. I think I was like finishing my second year. And I just like quit everything, sold everything, emailed Jesse and was just like, "Yo, is that room still available?" And he's just like, "Yeah." And I just booked a flight to Japan and with one of the other mates from that trip. And then it just kind of like snowballed. And then all of a sudden I was sitting there being like, shit, like I'm going to live in Japan. I've got a year holiday visa. And I didn't know one person back then that had ever done anything like that. Like I said, it was pretty early days of drifting. Like, yeah, that would have been like 2008, 2009.
Wow.
And yes, people were over there doing cool drift stuff, but not a lot of people were like flying over and doing working visas and like buying a drift car. Because you had to know, like, if you don't know Japanese, how do you do that stuff? You know? And Jesse just like, I don't know, like kind of took me under his wing. Didn't have to, but did. And I was like emailing him. I'm like, cool, like how much for the room? And he like lets me know how much it is. And it's like, he could charge me 3 times more if he wanted. And I'd still say yes. Like it still would be cheap, you know, but he just like hooked it up. I messaged him and I was like, "Can I buy a car?" And he's just like, "Yeah, send me a link." And I did that. I just found a 180, like a yellow 180, which is right up my alley on Yahoo. I think it was like 300,000 yen, like turbo SR, 2-way coilovers.
Yeah, those days are gone.
Yeah, they went pretty quick. And I sent him a link and he's like, "Sweet, deposit me the cash." And then he just like sent a photo of this. He organized me a car park and he was like, I flew into Japan before my mates. I flew by myself. And Jesse on the way back picks me up at the airport. On the way back, takes me past a parking spot just by their house, and there's like a yellow 180 sitting in a car park like at 10 p.m. at night. And he's just like, mine. "That's your car." Just like drives past it. And then we just like turn up to his house and he just like takes me up and he's like, this is your room. And I was like freaking out, like pretty big, like that was kind of my OE, you know, like it was like my first big, like, I don't know, time away from home and doing everything by yourself, learning to iron your own shirts and cook your own food and stuff. And yeah, Jesse just kind of just took me under his wing, like I said, and just treated me like a son and was like, yeah, I'm going to make sure that you drift and have a good time. So it was pretty cool.
I had no idea any of this happened.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
incredible.
Yeah. It was, even thinking back on it now, I'm like, it would never happen anymore. Like, Jesse's a hardened dude now. Like, he's not just going to take some guy under his wing. But I think, like I said, I think the Seas Garage thing like helped out a lot with that, and like Zip Tied and everyone, the drifting scene on the internet being a little bit smaller back then kind of helped with like connecting people a bit more. So like, like when we first met Jesse, I was like, hey, I'm Joel, like we run this thing called Seas, and he's like, yeah, I've seen Seas Garage before. And it's like that you had that connection, you know, which was now with everything being so saturated, you're not gonna grab onto people as much, you know, if meeting them for the first time. So yeah, and ended up in Japan with a 180, like kind of thrown in the deep end. Hadn't really worked on engines by myself without having Adam.
Yeah.
So he was like on speed dial. Like anything went wrong, I was like speed dialed Adam. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, would let me know how to fix it. But that was really good. It got me out of my comfort zone and it really made me a bit more self-sufficient. And Jesse being such a busy, driven guy with his business meant that like you
were on your own.
Yeah, I was on my own. Yeah, I was. Like, Jesse's not going to come up the road and help me take the head off because the head gasket's blown. Like, that's going to be on me. But Jesse introduced me early on to a guy called Shane. He was one of the co-founders of Stacked. I think you know probably Shane because he helped with...
I know Ewan also.
Yeah. And Shane did exactly the same thing. Like he's probably the first one to say he's a pretty hard case dude. Like, but he just took me under his wing and was just like, for some reason, like, I'm going to help this guy out and make sure he has a good time, kind of thing. And Shane was running kind of like partners in this really early drift rentals company back then called K Tours Osaka.
I think I saw that.
Yeah. I had to think about that. That's like a long time since I thought about that name. And so I was like drifting at the same time they were doing K Tours. So I could kind of like tag along. Like if they were going to Behoku, I'd tag along and like drift with them. And if they were doing Suzuka Twin, like I'd do the same thing. And Shane had a Japanese buddy's workshop that he worked out of, and like that also, like the help I got from Jesse and the help I got from Shane, like really allowed me to just drift. Like I drove as much as I possibly could. I knew I was there for a year, and I was like I love surfing, and I love like back then I was snowboarding a lot. And I was just like, I'm just going to ignore all of that stuff and I'm just going to drift. Like I've got 1 year, let's drift as much as I can. And I feel like for the first 6 months while I had that yellow 180, I definitely achieved that. Like I was doing at least a track day a week, and most weeks like 2 times going to the mountains, which was, or the port, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
you had to go in like the early days before it's like absolute danger.
Yeah, like I missed the port days. That was Jesse days. Like when I've heard stories about like down at the Osaka ports, there would be 100 drift cars, and there would be food trucks. Like the food trucks would pull up, and there'd be crowd, because it was really like drifting in Japan was actually like a cool thing in the early days. So like young kids would go out to the port and like watch drifters drift, like aspiring to be those guys, and they'd like, you know, get a hot dog or whatever they were getting from the I don't know what they were getting from
the
exactly, like some takoyaki or something. But I definitely missed the port days, but the mountains were still like, as long as you weren't posting about it on the internet and being like, that wasn't as much of a risk back then, because like Instagram was just starting. There was no YouTube was around, but it wasn't what YouTube is today. So as long as you weren't posting about it and being like a dick and blowing it up, then you could be at the, like, in the mountains from, I don't know, 11 at night till 6 in the morning if you wanted to.
Speaking of posting it on the internet and blowing it up, would you ever imagine that your roommate in Japan would be featured on Sports Center?
Jesse?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts. And it's like the worst video to be on, like, public publication like that. Like, Jesse it's videos of him drifting in the mountains, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why that's the thing that made it on Sports Center, but knowing Jesse, like I said, he's kind of like a mythical creature. Like, so many people know of him, but like not many people get the chance to actually meet him and talk to him. So
I've talked to him, not in person.
Yeah.
But I did talk to him about doing the podcast, and he's like, I kind of like what I have going on. Like, I don't really need. I like the mystery. I was like, that's cool. Honestly, I respect it.
Yeah, Jesse's kind of like Adam. He's very quiet. Like, they're both quite quiet dudes. Like, if you just meet them for the first time.
Has Adam and Jesse ever met?
Yeah. Well, Adam.
Did either of them talk at all?
It took them a while, but they got to it. Yeah. I think the same thing went that they both had like heaps of mutual respect for each other. Like, I think the first thing Jesse asked Adam was, can you build me one of those mid-mount manifolds?
Oh, yeah.
Because we were like obsessed with, there's an early video from the Suzuka Twin of Noki driving his S13, and he's got a Q-Mini on it, which is like the mid-mount octopus-looking manifold that we like. Or we used to like back then with the TDS6 on it. And so we got hooked on those. I was like, man, I just have to have a TDS6 with a Q-Mini on it. And Adam started making them out of steam pipe, or made a few, and that was like the first thing Jesse wanted. He's just like, make me a couple of those.
Yeah.
So Adam did, and like towards the end of my year stay, so my working visa was expiring, I taught English the whole time to stay afloat and to be able to afford to drift. I like within like a month, I landed this like really good teaching gig, which I was like teaching, like pretty much teaching kids, but I was at a private school, like an after school school. I only had to work 3 or 4 days a week, and that was like enough of a full-time wage to keep me like paying Jesse's rent, I didn't really buy tires. I just kind of like took Jesse's old tires, but buying new front tires and buying like wheels and parts and keeping the car going, and like gas and entry to the track and stuff like that. But towards the end of that stay, I just had been messaging Adam the whole time, being like, you have to come to Japan. I have a drift car. I'm never going to have a drift car in Japan. Like, potentially we'll never have one again.
Also, I need to make it up to you for the one that I crashed.
Yeah. Literally, come drive my car, because you let me do the same thing. And if you crash it, you crash it. Yeah. And so the very last month I was there, Adam flew over for like 2.5 weeks, I think, and like stayed in my room at Jesse's. And my whole goal was just to like show Adam the whole experience of what I was living over that year. So he got dicked around on his flight over, and he got diverted to Tokyo, and then had to train. He missed his connecting flight to Osaka, and then he had to like do like an overnight sleeper train, and he was like freaking out. And the day he was supposed to land was a Hitomi Go day at Meihan, which is like when Noki's driving, which is when Saimi's driving.
They've been doing Hitomi Go events that long?
Yeah.
Like, they still have them.
Yeah. So Hitomi was running that at Meihan, and they were like, back then, they were like the one that sold out weeks in advance. Like, all the cool drivers go, all the guys that are throwing down and driving proper harder at that event back then. I don't know if it's like that anymore, but it definitely was back then. So I literally picked Adam up at the train station at like 6 a.m. on his first day in Japan, like just fresh off the sleeper train. Train or bus. And he was like, he looked like his death. And I just chucked his luggage in the back of the 180. So I picked him up in my drift car.
That's sick.
Chucked his luggage in the back of the 180, chucked him in the passenger seat, got on the expressway to Meihan. And like the first thing that happens is like a D1 street legal car. I can't remember whose it was. Saimi's maybe, like the white one. I can't remember. Just like cruised up next to us,
that car.
Gave us a wave, and then just like nailed off to Meihan, because they used to drive pretty fast to Meihan. I'd drive pretty slow. I was always a bit scared. and just like straight into Mayhan, like he got to see it like all like Nike drive, and he got to drive. Oh, it wasn't the 180 then. Sorry, it was the Skyline. I had an R32 Skyline, a black one with an SR in it, and he got to drive Mayhan, and we took him to Suzuka, took him to Bihoku, took him to like the bars that we were going to at that point, because we were young and like doing a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, got to like give him that experience, which was really, really cool, and yeah, something that I'm pretty thankful for. Like to this day, that like Jesse, Shane, Jesse's wife Akemi, like all of them kind of like were willing to take me under their wing at that point in time, like kind of like shape. Like I probably wouldn't drift if I didn't get that deep into it then and had that opportunity, you know. So pretty thankful for that.
Yeah, that's an amazing experience.
Yeah, it's cool.
I think a lot of people would do unforgivable things to get that experience. But I mean, right place, right time.
Yeah.
Being a good dude, like stuff just works out.
Yeah, and drifting, like I said, it seemed a bit smaller back then, which was pretty cool.
They're like, oh, there's this other guy in this other country that likes drifting like us.
Yeah, there's a Kiwi over, like he can come hang out, you know? Yeah. So pretty sick.
Now it's like, oh, there's like a million of those people.
Yeah. Times have definitely changed.
Yeah. Getting in early does have its benefits.
Yeah. But it's cool now in some ways too. Like, I don't know. I watch a lot of YouTube, and it's pretty cool being able to having those like friends and people that you follow around the world, and like some of them being able to make a living out of it.
Yeah.
And like keep us entertained. You know, like it's pretty damn cool. You do what, you know, like you do this podcast, like you couldn't have done, there would have been 10 people listening back then, you know. Whereas now there's enough, like drifting's popular enough and it's blown up enough to be able to do cool stuff like this.
Don't worry, there's only still 10 people listening.
I hope there's more than 10.
You might get like 10 people that reach out and say like, good podcast.
My mom will probably be one of them.
Good. My mom listens to every single one.
Shout out to Lindsay.
Shout out Sunny. It's actually the first time I've done that in all these episodes. She's going to be so happy.
Nice.
What's up, everybody? It's CoroWorks time. You guys need Origin Arrow? They got it in stock. You guys need wheels? They can get them. Whatever you guys need. Parts from Japan. You need a car built. You need your car serviced. Bring it over to them over in Georgia. But also, they got cool parts that they make themselves. They got hydraulic e-brake handles. They got engine bay dress-up parts. They have pretty much everything you could ever want for your car. You can get it in one place, and that's CoroWorks. So, you know we love CoroWorks over here at the Goodest Cast. And if you want 15% off their CoroWorks branded products on their website, which is good stuff, man, head over there. Use code GoodestBoy, GOODESTBOY. Definitely check them out. Hey guys, do you want insane power? Do you want to be the most powerful guy or girl you've ever met? Well, guess what? To make power, you need pressure. And where's that pressure come from? That pressure comes from Fuel Lab. They got intake pumps. They can run ethanol. What else do you need? Fuel pressure regulators. Fuel Lab's got them. And if you're trying to build a setup that's reliable and you can run E85 on, or flex fuel, or race gas, or whatever you want, Fuel Lab's got you covered. It's what I run. If you want to save some money on some good stuff, I got you covered. Code Goodest on the Fuel Lab site at checkout gets you 15% off. There you go. You got a discount. Sick. So you go do this like mythical, amazing Japan year, and you come back, and are you just like locked into drifting, or is it like, are you over it? You're like, nothing will ever compare to this? No,
I'm pretty hyped on it at that point, like driving that often. And I'm younger than, I'm the little brother, and I'm also younger than all the guys I pretty much drifted with in New Zealand. So I was like pretty frothing to come back and be like, I can drive now.
Check me out, guys.
Yeah. Even though like to this day, I always kind of consider there's two levels of driving. There's like what the boys at like Mayhan and stuff are doing. And like I consider that like top tier kind of that's the kind of driving that I want to do. And those guys are doing it all the time, and they're doing it to that level. And like it's very, very, very difficult to get to that level if you're not that guy. Like if you're not at Mayhan drifting all the time,
Yeah.
or you're not, whatever track it is that you're driving, if you're not driving that often, like at least once a week or once every, 2 weeks, you're never going to get to that level. So like, I considered myself like very beginner tier at Mayhan at that time. But coming back to New Zealand, like you can do things that other people in New Zealand like couldn't do because you've been driving a lot more than they had.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, like doing backwards entries was like a new thing, right? Like I still remember the first video, like pre me going to Japan. I think it was Kawabata. I can't remember what track it was, but it's like fast. It's like top of fourth, and he's just doing this big lazy reverse entry and kind of like getting on the gas super late and making it around the corner, and all the commentators like losing their mind. And we're like, what the hell? You can drift over 90? Like, how do you do that?
That's still how I do backwards.
Yeah, so do
Lazy
I.
late throttle.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying not to do now.
Yeah.
But at Mayhan at that time, so I had like the 180, the yellow 180, then I had the SR Skyline. And I like chucked Sylvia front suspension into that Skyline, like in the car park up the road from Jesse's. It's like borrowed an angle grinder off Shane, sat a strut brace on top of like a Sylvia strut brace on top of the Skyline, like
Punch
struts, mark some holes, and just like got the like drilling the angle grinder and like cut holes and just like made it work and chucked all the Sylvia suspension into the Skyline. And then my whole thing was just like back then was I want to do, I guess we called them backwards entries. I don't know what we call them, reverse entries. That's all I wanted to do at Mayhan. Jesse was doing them. All the top guys at Mayhan were doing them. The only difference back then was the tires. So I would call that like the slippery era of like drifting. It wasn't the slammed era, which is like 2001, like early 2000s. I feel like slammed era was a certain thing. And then it kind of got into like a big focus on driving.
Mm-hmm.
But the cars were still like not so developed. Like they still ran like, just regular road tires on the back.
Like 235 or something.
Yeah. I was running 215s most of the time.
Mm.
But you could still load the car up like somewhat and flick the car to angle. But the difference back then was no grip in the back, and no one really knew what they were doing in terms of like Ackerman with knuckles.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point of knuckles back then was lock. Like I want to look like I want the most lock I can get, but what Ackerman I have doesn't matter, Like
what's Ackerman?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like we kind of knew what it was, and we kind of knew like it needed to be a certain, like it couldn't be too much, but it was all about the lock. So back then I like kind of got the Skyline to the point that I could flick it, get like in pretty backwards, but you're off the gas the whole corner until like almost like apexing, and then you're back on the gas. Like it's like the car doesn't have the Ackerman and the rear doesn't have the grip to be able to get on the gas earlier than that. If you got on the gas, it would try to loop. So like I kind of got to that level of driving, and I came back to New Zealand and thought like, fuck, I'm shit hot. I can kind of like flick my car in and like hang for like 30 seconds before I get on the gas. I'm the man. And I got back into New Zealand, and like we did that. Like I just like went to the tracks we were doing, and I just tried to flick in super hard. And all I cared about back then was like flicking to angle and just like doing the gnarliest flicks. Like that's all I wanted to do. And the cars were still somewhat slammed back then. Like that was like that in between era of really caring about driving, but the car still wanting to have the cars slammed. It's when Noki, Burst guys, and top Mayhan guys, just Jesse included, just started playing around with grippy rear tires. I remember Federal RSR was like one of the early tires that was affordable and was grippy. And they started putting those on, and then that started progressing their driving. Like the tires was, I feel like, the driving force, which got them into like getting on the gas earlier, flicking harder, and then the knuckles followed that after that with the Ackerman being like, well, if we want to get on the gas early, the knuckle has to have a lot lower Ackerman. Which is kind of like what B knuckle is now, which was why everyone uses it. You can like get on the gas straight away, and it like locks in at that angle. But yeah, came back to New Zealand at that point and just tried to like I felt like I was probably a better driver than Adam at that point, which was like not like my goal in life is not to be better at driving than Adam, but like having a brother that's good at everything and you being better at them than like one thing is like kind of a sick, like it feels pretty good. But then, yeah, I guess we kind of did that for a while, and like we had the car still somewhat slammed. We didn't have such a focus on grippy rear tires or anything like that until we did the event where we brought Noki and Mickey, like from Pink Style back then, to New Zealand to drive. And basically Shane, who I mentioned earlier, Shane from Stacked back then, it was Stacked Racing now, he pretty much sent us a list. He's like, well, if you're going to build Noki a car, this is what it has to be. And it was like B-knuckle, like the stance suspension, and they had to be spec'd to like Noki's specs. Two-way. It was super, the list is short. It's like 5 items. A seat that he can like put forward enough so he can reach the pedals, and like good tires on the back, like proper grippy 265s. So we built him. Adam just went like full hog building what we called the shop car back then, which is a car we bought together, an S13. He just like went nuts rebuilding that thing for Noki. And once we ran that event, Noki had a good car and was at our local track, Hampton. And like it was raining the whole track day, which was a shame. We brought him over in winter, which was a stupid move on our part. But he was just like killing it and on everyone's door as he does.
That the clips from that were like
Yeah.
mind blowing because
Yeah.
it's like you see him drive a Mahon and like he's good. I mean, a lot of people like didn't even know who he was.
Yeah.
And then you see him go to another country and just like blow everyone's
Oh,
minds.
dude. And that's literally what happened. I remember the first lap, he entered in like this shop car and just like dragged it down the wall at like the drag strip we used to drift, Mary.
Yeah.
And everyone just stood, like no one talked. Like everyone just stood there. There's like 40 people, like probably more than that because that was the private day, the day before the event. And there was just like silence. Like everyone's like jaw just like hit the floor. And we're like, he just dragged the whole wall faster than we ever have in the wet in a car he's never driven on the very first lap. It's not like he warmed it up. He just like drove down the end of the drag strip and then just like entered, like nailed it, third gear, flicked down the wall, perfect. And we were just like, this
Like,
dude's the man.
I'm like, okay, I guess
Yeah.
we all suck.
Yeah, literally. And at that event, it ran the whole time until the very last session of the main day, and that was Hampton. And he got one session in the dry. It was like patchy actually. Like where his flicking in was kind of wet, and then like he had like one bit of dry where he could get on the gas early, and then it went patchy again. And I managed to get in the car with him, but it was the same experience for everyone. He just drove Hampton in a way that like blew our mind, like so much faster than we drove it, like coming round onto the straight faster and entering faster, flicking 50 times harder right across the grass, like right next to the wall, instantly the angle, and then on the gas, like bang, straight away, like flick, gear change, gas, and then just like flying around the corner, like full mashed, full lock, no adjustment to the steering.
I think I remember like a clip with the trunk coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That car's always had one of those latches.
Yeah.
And Noki drove my car at that event, and it looked the part, right? It was like yellow at the front, red at the back, stickers all over it, like had our knuckles on it, and like Part Shop Max, like old Part Shop Max suspension. And he drove it in the wet, and I was expecting him to get out and be like, it's a good car. And he got out, and I just saw him like shake his head. And then I talked to Shane. I was like, what did he say about my car? And he's like, oh, dude, it's just rubbish. Like, and I was like, why is it rubbish? And he's like, the front tires are shit. The rear tires are shit. He doesn't know what the knuckles feel like because the front tires are so shit. And none of the suspension moves. It's just all shit. And I was just like, the dude that I look up to the most just like shat on this, like my pride and joy, right? And Shane wasn't doing it in like a mean way. He was like concerned. And he's like, the next thing he said is he's like, dude, get in the shop car. None of us had driven the shop car. Adam had tested it like a few runs at the drag strip, but like hadn't driven it on a big track. Shane's like, get in the shop car now. like at the event, and do some laps. Like Noki will get out, you get in. And I got in it, and then it like went round, and I was just like, oh my God. It was wet, but it like the car moved. You flicked in, you could get on the gas. The knuckles like locked you in an angle. It drove where you pointed the wheel, like it didn't float. Like that feeling that high Ackerman knuckles give and like old style knuckles give is when you flick, you would have to wait for like the back to grip and then get on the gas. This like didn't feel like that at all. You just like flick gas, like it just like always wanted to be on gas, had grip everywhere, and it felt like my car felt in the dry, but it was the wet. And after that event, and after us building that style car, we were just like, fuck, we suck. We need to make our cars what that car is, and we need to drive like he does, like, you know. So that's when the cars got more serious. I was already addicted to driving and only cared about driving at that point. Like my whole like, I have to have the coolest wheels, I have to have everything perfect at that point didn't like, had started to kind of fade away. But that's when we got really serious into being like, oh fuck, if we want to drive how he drove Hampton or how he's driving Mayhan, or even like be remotely
adapt.
Yeah, our car has to have that formula or that like recipe. A lot of people think that you can drive a slammed car like that, which you can get to like 80% of that, right? Which is sick, like 100%. And I still love those cars, that look, and like that's always going to be something that I really like. But that last 15, 20%, whatever it is, that's all I care about now. Like, you know, like if I'm entering 10K slower than one of my other buddies, like I'm unhappy. Like I have to be driving. Everyone wants to be the fastest. Everyone wants to do the gnarliest run. Everyone wants to have that clip on the gram that like, you know, like blows the internet up for an hour. Like that's like, I just want to like drive super gnarly. And yeah, I guess Noki bring him over kind of like, it was really cool. It got to show like everyone that feeling that I wanted to show Adam when he came to Japan. I wanted to take Adam to Mayhan to see Noki drive. It sounds so like lame just being so obsessed with one guy's driving.
And I think until you've seen it in person.
And at that time, he was like a league above the other guys at Mayhan.
Yeah.
They were all really like psycho drivers, like leagues better than like most people were at that point. But Noki just had this like X factor about him at that time. He was starting to like use grippy tires more than anyone else, and he was just driving like it looked like 20 k's faster when he was entering at Mayhan. And the flick was gnarly and everything was hectic. I wanted to show Adam that, and then we got to bring him to New Zealand, and just for that last session on the last day, we like got to show like, because that event sold out, so we got to show like hundreds of people, which was like pretty sick. That feeling, and then that changed a lot of things for lots of people in New Zealand. Like all our buddies that drifted and people that weren't our buddies that drifted started being like, fuck, we want to drive like that.
There's something to that.
Yeah. And that I really feel like was a turning point for like New Zealand drifting at Hampton. Like now you can go to a day and there's like, I don't know, a handful of guys that are driving sick, which is super cool. And all trying to do the same thing and all trying to one up each other. And like, yeah, it's like a pretty cool thing that all stemmed off that event.
Yeah, you got to have that perspective shift.
Yeah. You guys got it too, right?
Yeah.
You brought him over for Super D?
Yeah, I didn't have much to do with it. I just showed up and kind of had my mind blown. But I can't remember if I rode with him in Japan before or after Super D. I think I went. They were really close.
Yeah.
But it was like 2016, right after your guys' event. Yeah, but having him come to the U.S. and put on a show and it was like so beautifully orchestrated because it was the weekend. It was like the weekend after the last round of FD Irwindale, and it's like maybe an hour and a half away.
Yeah, so all the drifting.
They walked around and they put flyers in all the like windshields of all the cars in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So like
Perfect.
so many people who didn't know what Super D was came to that event. Like it was, the timing just worked out, right? Like, and because it was after the end of the year, like some of the pro FD drivers brought their cars out to drive with Noki, and like he's in like a like bearing slapped like 2-liter SR with like, I don't know, probably TD06 bid mount, but not like crazy power. I think it was bottom mount. That car was not.
Yeah, I remember it wasn't special like engine setup at all, and he was just on
he's like
people.
pushing people through the first turn with the back of the car.
Yeah,
and you're like, dude, get fucked.
Yeah.
Like that is the coolest shit I've ever seen. And then that was, the track was a lot more narrow back then. I was just like, okay, like, there's a different level to this game, and that like we just saw the final boss, and like I'm still on level 1. I think it lit a fire for a lot of people. It lit a fire for me that took a long time to like even level up more. But you watch people like raise their cars, and I think the people that were at that event and drove that event and like tried to keep up realize that there is something to be said about car setup and like people's idea of what cool drifting is changes in that moment. It either does or it doesn't. You either like see it and you go, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, I want to do that and I'll do anything to do that, or you go, oh, that car's ugly, or and to each their own. But I went hard the other way.
Yeah, we had the exact same experience, which is cool. And it's crazy that he's probably done that around the world to multiple countries, which is like, there's not many sports that there's like this one guy going around just like blowing everyone's minds, like, and then the rest of the world's trying to like chase after him.
Yeah.
So pretty sick.
And it was cool. It was like before he was back in D1. And
it's when it was banned, right?
Yeah. And so like you're just like, oh, this guy that like can't even compete at like professional drifting in anywhere is like coming and blowing everybody's minds.
Yeah.
And then you go see him drive D1 and just like dominate, and you're like, well, no shit.
Yeah, he's a special breed, that dude, which is pretty cool. And it's cool how it's kind of like the people that I look up to most in drifting at the moment have all kind of like followed in his footsteps a little bit. Like Julian, like you guys, Casey from Shirt Tucked In.
Yeah.
Like
Casey needs to slow down, dude.
Yeah, dude. Casey,
I can't. I save some skill for the rest of us, dude.
Casey's one of those dudes I was talking about that, like, unless you've been to Mayhan and you've seen him drive, you don't understand how high his level is compared to like I don't know, you might have someone at your local track that you think is like the bee's knees at driving. Like Casey probably shits on that dude, like, not being mean, but like he drives so fucking good. And it's not unless you've been there, you've seen the car. The level that those dudes have got their cars to over there now with the grip, like Valino's. Like Valino's like changed the whole game again. Like in terms of like there's been grippy tires up until a point, and then I don't really know the story behind Valino too much, but that tire was just so much grippier than every other grippy tire that their driving just got so much gnarlier when they're on like the 08R. Like even the Driftmasters guys say, like our cars feel like the NA, like, and they've got 1,000 horsepower when they're on an 08R or whatever they are. So yeah, Casey's driving is insane. And to be able to drive the car that's set up like that well, lap after lap after lap.
Yeah.
And at multiple tracks is like super sick shit. Like mad props to him. Like he's pretty damn inspiring. He's probably one of my biggest like inspirations of drivers at the moment. But yeah, like you guys like following kind of, that's what we've all done. We've kind of followed in Noki's footsteps, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kept drifting really fun for us. Like I probably would have fallen out of love with drifting a bit more if it was just about the cars and having like the most slammed and the most, the best paint or whatever it was, like the coolest style. The driving thing and focusing on the driving and it all being about like doing the gnarly stuff, like that's kind of like our, I don't know, that's like the driver these days. Like that keeps us going.
I feel a lot better leaving a track day knowing that I drove the absolute hardest that I could and did something I'm proud of than feeling like the coolest one driving
Yeah.
through the pits.
Yeah, 100%.
Although, like, back when I was younger, I think it was about 50-50.
Oh, dude, I was completely in the head to have the coolest car direction. I remember making Adam the story about trying to shorten axles, like literally cut and weld an axle in the center of the shaft, was because I had these certain wheels. I think there were some big 5-spoke equips that I had to run for the track day tomorrow, and we'd shorten the lower arm to be able to fit the wheel because it's such a wide wheel. That was the only way to make it work without having ridiculous camber. And then we took it for a drive up the road and the axle's bound up. Like, the CVs and the axles are like pushing against the cup because there's not enough lower arm. And then I'm like, well, shorten the axle then. And Adam's just looking at me like, it's not going to work. And you're like, cut, V'd it, sleeved it, second lap, ping, like broke. But all I cared about was having like those wheels on the back, like that, like I don't know.
You're shortening axles that now have like 60 pounds of rotating mass on them.
Yeah. But now, like, I couldn't care if we turned up with a car that's in no bumpers, 50 different colors. Like, of course, I really want the car to look good.
Yeah.
But it's more about the driving these days.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's the evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. The car becomes like more of a tool to be able to do the cool shit. Yeah. And if the car looks cool at the same time, that's kind of like a bonus,
I agree.
Yeah. So
speaking of like evolution, I see you guys are playing with Corollas, which is kind of like going back to the Starlet days in a way.
It's like regressing.
Yeah. What was the inspiration behind all that?
Like we had back in the day, I'm not sure if you'll remember, but we had like an old Corolla wagon, like a red one.
Yeah.
Two-door, leaf sprung rear, like crack up little wagon. So twin light Corolla with a carbed 4-age setup on it. And it was all slammed, 3-piece wheels, like big stretch tires. And we like skidded it around a bunch at that Mary, that drag strip I was talking about. And kind of got the taste for like NA driving then. Didn't have the car set up well at all, like leaf sprung, like knuckles that Adam just tried to make work kind of thing. It drove good, but it was still like a slammed NA Corolla, like real slippery. And had that for a while, but always the silvers were always the main like focus. And then by chance, probably 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, just doing your average car guy thing, which is trawling Facebook Marketplace. Like, got too many projects that don't work and then decide to buy another one. But there pops up this A86, yellow, the same yellow as our cars, like all painted, caged, painted with a 3SGE Beams engine in it. And I'm always thinking about, like, because we've kind of lived through that like evolution of cars being really cheap and then now being too expensive, like an R32 GDR, when we were young.
It was like a $10,000 car.
Literally. In New Zealand, like, I think I said no to one that was like less than 10 grand at one point. Yeah, I know. Hindsight. But so we've lived through that like evolution of cars being overly affordable, like literally being like, consumable, like you can throw them away if you crash them, to now being like unachievable. Like, I'm not going to spend 150 grand on a 90s Skyline.
No.
Because it's a 90s Skyline. Like, it's a shitbox. Like, if I'm going to spend 150 grand, it's not going to be a shitbox.
Yeah.
It's going to be like a Porsche or something. Arguably still probably a shitbox. But, like, I'm a big, like, I'm always looking at, like, what's next? What car's going to, like, what truck? I'm really into 4x4s, like old 90s, like, not just Toyotas, like any kind of 4x4, like, truck. And I knew like 86s, they're going the same way as Sylvias. They're not only like highly collectible, but they're going to get to a certain point where they cost so much that you're not going to drive them into your mate willingly or drive them into a wall willingly. And that they were already had gone in that direction, and this one just happened to be the right recipe of yellow, which nobody wants, like bright yellow too, which like I'm probably the only person in New Zealand that wanted that color. It wasn't road legal. It was caged. Like everyone that's spending a lot of money on 8.6s is looking for everything that car
perfect,
isn't. You know, they don't want yellow, they don't want cage, and they want it to be street legal. So it was a good price point, and I was just like, look, kind of like, I'm just going to buy it so I have an 8.6. Like it's never going to be this cheap again. If I ever want to drift one, this is the highest price I'd ever spend on a drift car. And like me and Adam were going surfing one day after work, and I like had it on like my saved listings, and I like passed it to him in the passenger seat while I was driving, and he just passed it back, and he's like, buy it. Like, fuck, if he's on board, you know, then it's going to probably turn out a lot better. So as long as he's on board, like I'm going to buy it. So he kind of gave me like the motivation to like actually message the guy. It was in the South Island, got it shipped up sight unseen, this yellow 3S 8.6. Didn't want a 3S, but it's a good engine to drift with, right? Like good torque, really heavy, but you can still drift with it. And we had the motivation for it was we had discovered there's a thing called 8.6 Champions Cup, which is, I think it's like the Tech Arts guys in Japan and a bunch of other like core A86 like old boys. They run this drift competition like once a year, and it's like all the 8.6 drifters from around the country come together at an event, and they drive. It's like not like a cool 8.6 showcase day. It's like we come here and it's a competition, and who's the best dude at driving 8.6s. And there's about 10, 15 of them. That the video that I discovered, I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago, the event was at Bihoku, and there's like a large number of those dudes that drive super hard. And in my head, 8.6s had always been slammed, slippery secondhand tires, or slippery tires in general, and like mungy the straight. Like you don't drive them you drive them fast because they need to drive fast to drift. But if there's a straight, you mungy it, and you're not like doing stuff that the guy on the side of the track is going to be like impressed with, you know? It's like fun for the driver, not so much for the guy watching. But then I saw this 8.6 Champions Cup thing, and I was like, shit, these two guys are driving hard. And I like started paying a lot of attention to what engine setups they were running. They're all 4-age, but they're decent power 4-ages. What tire, what suspension, what knuckles, what lower arms. And kind of like started piecing together this recipe. And we, like me and Adam were building up that 8.6, the yellow one, and like it's a low Ackerman knuckle, trying to build it like a Sylvia. Low Ackerman knuckle, lower arm that's the right length, spacer that's the right amount of spacer, suspension that actually moves, tires that are like grippy front tire, and a rear tire that's balanced to that grippy front tire. They're solid axle, so you don't have to run the same tire, like the same compound front and back, for it to feel like perfectly balanced. You can have a really grippy front tire and run like a pretty average street tire on the back. And because the solid axle is so grippy, it like balances really easily, and because the car is so light. And while I was building up that car, Adam, big brother syndrome's like, fuck, little brother's got a cool Toyota. Like, I need a cool Toyota. So one day he like, bought this twin light 4-door sedan AE70.
Sick. I
Had
love that car.
Had a black top in it. It was like an ex-race car. So like nothing, like had the engine, but nothing to do with drifting. So Adam like spent all the time. So we kind of did everything at the same time, because my car was like not really a drift car either. It like had been built as like kind of like a street drift looking car. So we did all the same stuff at the same time, took them to a track day. I flicked into which was Hampton, that's the only track we really drive, club circuit. I flicked into the first corner like in fourth, and got on the gas early, and it like locked in like the Sylvias do. And I was just like,
this is the coolest.
Oh shit, this is going to be way, way more fun than I ever thought it would be. And then like we have some buddies that have been driving like 8.6s for like forever, and some other buddies that are like just got into 8.6s. And then that, like, everyone was kind of like hyping each other up, and it felt like those early days of like Sylvia drifting again, where we're all like, one, we didn't know Corollas could drive like this. Two, how can we make them drive better? And three, like, everyone's like now like wanting to do the same kind of driving. And then you've got a whole bunch of guys that can drive together, which would be sick.
Oh.
So yeah, the Corolla's feeling like the Sylvia does when you flick in and get on the gas early, but using not even a whole set of tires for the whole track day, and just being the most light, fun car ever. Oh, and tandeming in them is amazing too, because, you know, Sylvia is a little bit heavier. So when you flick in behind someone, if you have to wash off a lot of speed really quickly, like let's say you get on the brakes really hard, the car wants to kind of like wash wide. Corollas just stop where they are. Like, it's like literally like they don't lose any angle, they don't gain any angle because they're so light. You just put your foot on the front brake while in drift, and they just stop, and then you put your foot on the gas and they go. Like, it's like the coolest car to tandem with. And our first experience of like tandeming in an old, you know, NA car. So I guess we're kind of like really late into the game to what a lot of people have discovered long ago, which is 8.6s are fucking fun to drive. But the thing that got us into it is like 8.6s are fucking fun to drive, and you can also do like the gnarly kind of driving at Club Circuit, our local track that we want to do in the Sylvias, kind of in a Corolla.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're pretty like, we've gone like full ham on them now. Like, I ripped the 3S out, Adam ripped the black top out, and we're building like pretty high power 7A, like I guess they call them long rod engines, which are engines that's 1800 cc, but still has the rod, like the stroke ratio that it will rev like a 4A. And you can make like, I don't know, 150 kilowatt, like, hopefully out of them. And yeah, there's Hibino in Japan has like a 7A Corolla that he drifts. I think he just came second in D1 lights at Mahon actually, which is,
yeah, that says a lot.
like a NA like Corolla at Mahon. But watching heaps of videos of him too, like kind of like, you know, you're always like inspiring to some kind of people. There's another driver in Japan called Hamashin who drives, he did have a 4A Corolla, but now he has like a Honda powered one. But they just drive like super gnarly. And so we're just like, I don't know, we've got all these rad guys to look up to and like nice like little recipes on how to build the cars. So yeah, it's pretty fun.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'm a big Toyota fanboy. So that's on my list at some point.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that to like anyone that enjoys drifting that hasn't done NA driving.
I love a KE. Like,
yeah.
I
think the KEs, like, it sounds weird, I think the KEs actually drive better than the 8.6s too.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if it's because they're lighter. I haven't looked into them enough, but I've driven Adam's car at Hampton, and that thing drives so good. So like, you don't have to spend the money and buy an 8.6. Like, you can buy a Corolla, like a KE.
I need to buy one before this podcast comes out. Everyone's gonna figure out the magic.
Like, blow up.
Yeah. Let's talk about your empire that you've created during all this other driving stuff. And like, when we were in New Zealand, you're like, oh yeah, that's like my shop that we're putting together. And I don't know, it's pretty impressive, all the stuff you've been able to do, and also push driving and C's Garage and everything else.
Thanks.
Like, C's Garage is like a very small percentage of your time.
Yeah, it has, and definitely like over the past 10 years has become like a lot. Driving hasn't happened as much, which isn't great, but yeah, C's Garage, like I'll always say, it's kind of sounds weird, but like starting a blog and like starting an Instagram and like having to document like what me and Adam are building with cars kind of taught me, like paved the way in my mind on like kind of like opening up a more entrepreneurial path, because I had to name a blog, I had to come up with a logo, I had to learn how to take photos and write copy on websites and how to register domain names, like all that like stuff you would learn when starting a business.
Yeah.
You learn if you want to like start a blog or a website to sell merch or whatever it is,
Can I ask, who is C?
C is when we started it in 2007, we lived in a place called Coatesville. So it was like Coatesville's Garage.
Mm.
And we don't live there anymore. But like you're probably like one of the few people that know that what the C's means. No one ever asked that. They just
I've
like,
always wondered.
yeah. But yeah, C's definitely taught me early blog days, then into Instagram, then into like making stickers and t-shirts. Like taught me the foundations of like essentially running a business.
I don't know what, yeah. Do you guys just have like an eye for cool shit? Because the C's Garage like logo is very simple.
Yeah.
It's like a flip of something that's pretty cool. I'm like, it's like my favorite shirt. I wear it all the time.
Oh, the boss one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything we do is like, I say this to everyone, like everything we do in drifting is just ripping what Japanese guys did in 2001, right? So I just lived there and like liked the Boss Coffee logo. And like Adam had that haircut, like the kind of like slicked back shaved side haircut. And I was like, let's make like a Boss Coffee themed tee with like Adam's haircut and turn the guy into a skull. And yeah, that t-shirt's like transcended C's Garage. Like this, my mates from school and like my mates they all love that t-shirt. So that's pretty cool.
I think I've worn that shirt on the podcast more than like anything else.
Sick. Yeah, I love like it's such a cool feeling seeing like your brand, like someone that you rate wearing it, like it's pretty damn cool. But now with the business stuff, like I've always had a pretty entrepreneurial mind, and I think that's because Adam's always been so good at building the cars. Then like, what does that leave me to do, right? Like obviously I can bolt the cars together, and I'm mechanically minded. I can do like some light fab and stuff like that. But that left me to like really focus on like the aesthetics of the cars. Like I was always like, I'm all about like what they look like, what the stickers look like, the wheels. Like Adam has that too, but like that's always been my big focus. And then business wise, like that kind of got me into the groove of like having my own business back then. That was probably like started in 2007. And from that, I, fresh out of uni, got back from Japan, finished my uni, like did 2 more years of uni, finished that. What am I going to do now? Like I've just studied business for 4 years. I should probably start a business.
Have existential crisis and
Yeah.
go surfing.
Yeah, I should have done that. Looking back on it, I should have done that. But Japan's like drifting's been a big inspiration for a lot of things in my life. So back then, like in Japan, all the guys at the track were wearing really cool overalls at the track. It's like one guy in particular. I should know his full name, but the guy from Looking, he runs a paint shop called Looking. He had an A86 and he was always wearing these sick overalls, always had a ciggy hanging out of his mouth, just like essence of cool Japanese car guy. And he was kind of like my inspiration. I was like, I want cool overalls. Like when I'm at the track, why do I have to wear these oversized Dickies overalls or like these cheap things? They can look cool. Had some other mates from school that had started a clothing company and were doing really well, and it was all made in New Zealand. And they actually reached out to me to like test some of their like denim that they were making, like raw denim jeans out of like Japanese salvage. And they were like, yo, can you wear some of this in the workshop and let us know, like try and blow it out. And like, then we'll make it better if you blow it out. And then one of them was like, what would you make if you could make some clothing? And I was like, I'd make some overalls. So we worked on that together as like a collab. And like well into the collab, we made these overalls together, like Japanese style, made in New Zealand. And I was like, dude, like it was just going to be one pair. Like all this work was like for one pair of overalls. And we both like got to the end, like we're like wearing these overalls. And we both were just like, dude, we need to make more of these. Like these are sick. So we started a business together, which was called Earnest, which was the kind of the ethos behind the brand was basically workwear and clothing that you would be happy to wear in the workshop but you could wear out in public and look like stylish, like you would look good still. You wouldn't feel uncomfortable wearing it in
So
public.
yeah, you were way ahead of the workwear game.
Yeah, that was kind of the vibe back then, like good fitting overalls made out of good heavy canvases. Like there was obviously Carhartt and Dickies making them out of like taking that Carhartt like construction, but like not being a one size fits all, like, 20-inch wide leg kind of thing.
Right.
And that snowballed into like a full on business. Taught me a whole lot about business. I actually ended up like taking over the whole business after that overalls collab and kind of like running with it and learning how to like look how are we going to make these? We got to get them made in China, or where do we get them made? Can we get them made in New Zealand? And then Ernest kind of snowballed into like workwear, like because I was in the workshop with Adam, and we used to drive a lot more with a buddy called Graham, that had a C's Garage S13. But again, like super talented fabricator. So like most of my time was spent like hanging out with these dudes while they were building these like pretty sick cars. And I was always like, how can I fit in here? And I was like, well, your welding gloves kind of suck. Why do you have 50 pairs of welding gloves that you go through once a week? Like, how can I make these better? And that Ernest really snowballed into just like making good gear for guys that are fabricating, making it in a way that it fits and it's made in a high enough quality that like I'm proud of it and it looks sick. And trying to like fill little niches that people haven't thought about with like things like welding gloves and like putting like Kevlar layers in different areas so that they wouldn't heat up as quick, and like, but still looking like a glove that you could like jump on a bike and ride like still a cool looking glove. So that was kind of like I guess that would be my first business, like if you're not calling C's a business.
Ernest was sick. Like
Yeah.
I remember Julian and
Yeah.
Ryan like getting to be I guess
like ambassadors, I guess,
yeah,
like early
and
ambassadors.
I was like, man, I want one of those.
Yeah.
Ryan was wearing
Yeah.
the jumpsuit,
Yeah,
the
at the
like
event.
coveralls at Super D
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah. So
He looks-
those are like 10 years old, which is crazy to see him still wearing them, and like so sick to turn up and he's wearing Ernest gear. But yeah, like I said, drifting does trickle through a lot of the stuff I've done. So like when creating like this workwear brand that was like motorsport, like heavily like motorsport affiliated, like what do? You reach out to all the buddies that you've made. So reached out to Julian and Ryan, like Animal Style, like, can you guys like be ambassadors? And they were like, dude, just, you don't have to ask, like just send us gear. Like and that was like the coolest thing. Everyone was so supportive. Like we're just like this little company from New Zealand. And reached out to Nigel, engineered to slide. He's like the Australian freaking wizard, and has always been a massive inspiration for what we do. Like I feel like what he started building with like the high tube frame Hilux and stuff,
so sick,
kind of like changed the way a lot of like at home fabricators think about how they fabricate. Like it really leveled everyone up. So like working with Nigel was really sick. And then obviously the States motorsports, there's a lot of cool guys doing cool stuff here. So Ernest was like heavily working with a lot of guys from the States, and just taught me everything. Like taught me really good lessons and really like harsh lessons, but just, I don't know, I got to run like a really like fun, I guess, apparel company that was like really directed towards the stuff that I loved, which was like motorsports, guys building their own cars, and getting to like curate a brand that like looked exactly how I wanted it to look. And then again, another business that kind of stemmed from drifting, we got invited over to the Queensland Matsuri in Australia to drive some of Aaron from JDM Garage, because he was the K-Tours guy. He's like, yeah, we'll come to Australia, come drive some of our cars. So me and Adam flew over for the Matsuri weekend and got to drive a bunch of people's cars, which was really sick. And at that track, there's like one hotel in the local town. And we asked all the boys, like, there's hundreds of drifters there. Like drifting in Australia is serious. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people like it.
Yeah.
And that kind of blew our mind being from New Zealand.
It's the perfect place for drifting.
Yeah. It's like a party and drifting on the side. And they're all drinking, like they're all on the tins drinking piss like the night before the drift event. And I'm just like, where are you guys all staying? There's one hotel in this town and it's like probably sleeps 30 people. And a bunch of them are like, we're sleeping on the top of our trucks. I was like, kind of didn't think anything of it. I was like, what do you mean? And then another guy said, oh, I'm sleeping on the top of my truck. And I was like, I don't know, you're sleeping on the roof platform? You're like putting a sleeping bag up there? Like, what's going on? And like, I feel pretty like, I've traveled a lot of places like surfing and like drifting. And like at that point, like felt pretty like traveled. And they took me over and like showed me these roof tents, like, you know, like, which is a pretty commonplace thing these days. But back then, like, I was blown away. I was like, I have to have one of these. Like everything I do in life was centered back then around drifting or surfing. And like roof tenting is just like surfing to a T. Like if you can like drive to a beach, surf, pop your tent up, sleep, put it down, drive to another spot that's pumping, pop your tent up, and it's just like easy camping. Because I've been doing that, but I've been doing it in like ground tents my whole life, just being like a ratbag kid going on like surf trips with their mates, you know. So got back from Aussie, was like, I have to buy a roof tent, and then realized how expensive they were to import and that none of them were really made for like rain. They were all like Australian or African like designed, which is like, you just don't go camping if it rains, like in those countries. Where in New Zealand, you don't really have that option. So we bought like a generic one, like imported a generic one and started using it. It leaked like a sieve. The sun killed the material in like 2 months. And me and Beth just sat down and we're like, Beth's my partner. And we'd been running Earnest together. And we kind of sat down and we're like, look, we've been literally designing like textile products for the last 3 years or 2 years. I had been with Earnest, and like we've been working with like metal fabrication with cars. So like, why don't we try and like make our own rooftop tent that like works in New Zealand? Long story short, started a company 10 years ago called Feldon Shelter. And just like focused on developing like a really good product that we wanted it to be New Zealand made, but there's just not the manufacturing in New Zealand. We quickly realized that like could handle, one, the price point that people would be willing to pay for a tent, and two, could make more than like 10 a year. So like, we're like, shit, we're gonna have to go to China. But through all my Earnest learnings, like I had like a lot of experience in traveling over there and finding suppliers and like getting proper, like high quality materials made. And I've just been like focused on like making good clothes for so long. I was like, we can probably make good tents too. And that just snowballed. Like 10 years later, we kind of rode the wave of roof tents becoming a really popular thing to do, especially in New Zealand.
Your timing was impeccable.
And yeah, we kind of nailed that. And we managed to just like create like a really good product of a really like a brand that I was really proud of, and kind of became the tent for, you know, the last 10 years. Like people in New Zealand for a large period of time called roof tents Feldons, which is like,
that's the coolest thing
that's
you can
like
do with a brand.
that is the goal of any brand. And like, yes, New Zealand's a small, we got like 5 million people, but it still feels good being able to have like a product that is that in a country. And yeah, Feldon's at a certain point in time early on in Feldon's life cycle, I had to decide like, look, it's me and Beth. How are we going to run Earnest and Feldon at the same time? And at that point in time, if I'm being like dead honest and transparent, like I can sell a roof tent that's worth $2,000, or I can sell overalls that are worth $200. I've got to sell 10 of those. If I can deal with one customer instead of 10 customers, I'm going to deal with one customer. Like that's like, the less customers I have to deal with, the better. You know? Not saying that customers like are bad to deal with, but like any business, like the less work you have to do in terms of like customer service and stuff. And like I get to go camping and surfing and build trucks. Like
as part of your job,
I can hang out in workshops and build cars as a hobby. Like getting to do more of that, like the surfing part, was like very freeing at that point. So I was like, let's run with Feldon. So there was literally a day where me and Beth sat down and chose which direction to go. And we parked Earnest, and Feldon was so busy that we didn't even have time to like really like shut it down or look at handing it off to anyone or anything. But just so happened, Nigel from Engineer to Slide like reached out, and he's like, what's going on with Earnest? And I was like, oh dude, it's like nothing, because I'm so busy. And he's like, well, I want it, you know. So Nigel and a few buddies that were running some business stuff at that time purchased the brand off me and like ran with Earnest, which was like for me the dream result. Like I got to like craft this brand that I was so proud of, and then like hand it off to the guy that the brand was made for. Like literally, like Adam and Nigel were like the two inspirations for the brand, and he ran with it and did really cool stuff. I think he's gone on to other projects since, but
I don't know how he has time for anything.
he's the same thing, right? Like he's got so many opportunities, and
he's got like the welding courses or fabrication courses, and he actually sponsored the podcast a long time ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Sick.
He hooked it up with anyway, whatever. He's like gave me like a year of his fabrication course to sponsor that. That was like one of the coolest. Being able to do an ad for Engineer to Slide was like probably, it's still to this day like the coolest ad I've gotten to do. Yeah.
Shout out to Nigel. He's the man. Nicest dude on the planet too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Earnest got handed off to Nigel. I ran with Feldon and got really involved in building really high quality rooftop tents, building trucks to go along with that. Like it's just like a bit of fun. So I've got like a whole bunch of fun camping rigs like that we have in New Zealand.
Yeah, we got to sample that when we came out there.
Yeah.
We had like the Landy, and we're all like driving. Yeah, that was honestly, that was like one of my favorite parts of the whole trip, was like everybody going to the beach for the day and all the trucks.
Yeah, it's funny how like you can have these like super fast, like well-built drift cars, and then just have these ultra shitbox 80s like four-wheel drives, and they both excite you the same way. And everyone that's into drifting is also like, I don't know what the crossover is there, but like if you like 90s drift cars, you like 90s trucks. Like they just both have the same vibe.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool. And yeah, I've just had a lot of fun, like kind of learning all the ebbs and flows of business, and like learning to run a business with my partner Beth was a big thing, and still being able to surf, still being able to drift, like keeping all of those hobbies as hobbies and still having the passion for them has like always been a big thing for me. I never wanted to like take away, turn drifting into a career. Like it might take away some of that passion. Obviously, if I had the option to do it, I probably would have done it. But yeah, it's been a pretty wild ride. We're 10 years into Feldon now, and still going. So,
how do you find time to balance all these things? Running I'm sure like running a company that big is pretty demanding time-wise.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I couldn't answer that question because my balance gets thrown out like on the rig. Like there'll be, this past 2 years have probably been the least amount of driving I've ever done, which is a shame. And not a whole lot of that is because of the business. A lot of that's because of like, I'm going to rip this car apart and rebuild it, and thinking I have more time because I might have that time at that certain point in time. But a month later, business takes over and you're like, dude, if I've got 6 hours free this whole week, it's going to be hard for me to spend those 6 hours in the workshop, life takes it. And I think everyone that's like come through drifting and grown into like, whether it's like business, work, having a family, like, pets, like it can be anything, like life takes over. And drifting is a pretty demanding hobby. Like surfing's always been a release for me that I can like, you can pick up a surfboard, pick up your wetsuit and a towel, put them in the back of your car that you drive every day, drive to the beach and have like the time of your life. Like if you score the waves, it's like the best thing ever. Drifting's like, I need to work on my car every night for the next 2 weeks and I'll go to the drifting and the car might break. Like it's a very demanding and very like sometimes not rewarding hobby. So to kind of have the balance, yeah, I've struggled with the balance of drifting. I wish I could drive more. That's why I respect dudes like Casey so much, because not only does he drive like a shit ton, he has a highly successful, demanding business himself
Yeah.
and a whole life, like, so he's really prioritized, like, look, I'm going to drive as much as possible. And like, yeah, I rate the shit out of that. Like, I wish my goal for 2025 is to drive a lot more, like have all my cars running and just drive. Like that's Adam's goal too, which is pretty sick because we both haven't drifted as much as we wanted to. So yeah,
It's a good goal.
yeah. I hope I can drive a lot more this year.
My goal is to find your surfing.
Find
Like,
like a hobby like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's like I'm just grinding on work or the podcast or whatever idea I'm trying to pursue, and then drifting is like my escape.
Yeah.
But it's not accessible.
Yeah.
Like I can't get to it very easily,
Yes.
and sometimes it doesn't go the way that you hope in it. I think that.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to like surfing. To me, has always been that thing that like makes me want to drift. Like so. Yeah, having that, I guess I've taken it for granted a bit. Having a easier hobby. Yeah, I don't know what that could be for you, but there's definitely something out there.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Do you know what it would? Have you got
No
any
idea.
idea?
No idea.
Okay,
I've been like so locked in for so long. I don't know.
you can try surfing.
Yeah. I'm like terrified of surfing.
Okay. Of the water, or
oh, so embarrassing. I hate falling in the water.
yeah,
but I think that's probably like maybe I need to like get past that.
yeah. I'm the same, man. Like a lot of people, yeah, I completely see that. The water's scary. And like waves when they get to a certain size, which for someone that doesn't surf doesn't have to be very big, they're fucking scary. So yeah, I can see that. But definitely, like anything, like you get more confidence, you get more experience, the waves feel less threatening.
Yeah, I feel like if you can get good at drifting, you can get good at other things.
If you can throw a car at a wall at whatever speed we throw a car at a wall at, like you can fall off a surfboard.
All right, maybe I'll try it.
Into the soft, mushy water.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
All right, this summer.
Yeah, we'll get you.
Oh, fuck.
You live in the right place to go surfing too.
Yeah.
Like we've been here, me and my partner have been traveling down the coast, the west coast, for 3 weeks now. And I've surfed 2 to 3 times a day, every single day for 2 weeks, which like, I don't know where else you can do that. Like we have just scored so many good waves.
Mhm.
Like that's like kind of Indonesia spec stuff, like we've had a good time. You live in a good place to surf.
All right. That's time. I'm gonna call my stoner uncle and fucking
get out there.
Yeah. He lives in a van too.
Does it?
Yeah.
Does he surf?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. He's a good guy though.
Yeah. Sick. There's a lot of stoner dudes in vans surfing out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, you probably crossed paths with him.
Yeah, I might have
point.
met
He
him
just quit
somewhere.
his job, so he's like out there. I shouldn't talk about him too much.
Yeah, sick.
He's a good dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we kind of talked about it, but are there any future plans for C's Garage or you or?
Yeah. Finishing the cars that we already have, like, is a big one. Adam spent a lot of time in 2024 getting the shop car back up and running. Better than ever, like full forged engine setup, which is the first time that car's had a built engine. That's running and it's running sick now. So that was a big feat, but my 1V, my S13 and Adam's S14 are still sitting there like half engine setups, like half built. So finishing both those cars and then just driving like the pants off those cars is like a big goal. Finishing the Corolla, I've like done a lot more work to the Corolla than I'm really bad at posting on Instagram. Like
It's okay.
it's probably my, like, I don't know. I used to be good at it and I used to like get a lot of like love out of it, but I don't know. like life takes over, and sometimes when you're so far behind in posting, it kind of becomes a bit daunting.
Dude, I get that.
Yeah.
I have like probably 100 posts worth of stuff from last year that just like I don't.
And it feels too long. Like you're like,
Yeah.
I've waited too long. It's not relevant. And it's like, dude, it's like, I feel like I just need to treat it like I'm just like showing my friends like this photo, you know, and like then I would post more.
Yeah.
So that's a big goal for this year. Like not only finish the cars, but like, I don't know, post on C's a bunch more. Like it sounds like a weird goal, like a kind of a small goal, but it's a big thing for us. Like it is cool building, like hang out with Adam in the workshop and building heaps of cool shit, but it's also nice like showing mates what we're up to.
Yeah. Maybe you should start a blog.
Bring the blog back, probably. That'd be sick. It's still there hanging around somewhere, but I think all the photos were hosted on like Photo Bucket and they're all like
Photo Bucket just did us all dirty.
Yeah, it did.
They ruined
Made
the
you
internet.
pay for it, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, watermarked everything. But yeah, other goals, like obviously I've got business goals. Feldon Shelter, like, and our other brand we supply, which is the shop we run, and we import a whole bunch of different 4x4 like camping brands and just like distribute them through New Zealand. Got a lot of goals with the companies, but outside of that, like drive more is probably the number one goal. And also I feel like now, especially in America, like after seeing like Final Bout this year and like what you guys have done with like Super D in the past, it'd be really cool to be like involved in something like that at some point. So that's kind of like on our radar too. Like, is that something at some point in our life, how could we drive like an event here maybe? Or like, could we do some more driving in Japan at some point? Like that's on the horizon, but that comes after finish the Sylvias, finish the Corolla, get like shake all the rust off and drive like better than I am at the moment, because I think I'd be so rusty that I wouldn't even want to be driving overseas. But yeah, probably the biggest goals for the year.
Yeah, I can't wait for you guys to come over here.
Yeah, it'd be sick. That'd be like a bucket list thing.
I need a redemption for my shit laps at Hampton Downs.
That track's kind of like, I don't know.
If you haven't driven it, it like watching does not do it justice. Videos definitely don't do it justice.
No, it looks chill in video. It is kind of chill. It's just faster than you think it is.
It's a lot faster than you think it is,
Yeah.
and there's like a decent amount of room for error. I don't know. I'm a lot better driver than I was back then. But yeah, definitely. I goofed.
Yeah. Well, that what we
sorry, Ruben.
Yeah, we would like if Ruben's listening, like Ruben from D Club, he needs to run another event, I think, because
that was such a good time.
Like that would be sick.
That was my absolute favorite international drifting trip.
Having you guys in New Zealand, yeah. That was a big thing for us too. Like, I don't know, just like getting to show you guys what we do and meeting like a lot of people we met you for the first time at that event. And I don't know, like being able to have everyone hanging out and just feeling like mates that haven't seen each other for a while, even though you've never met, is like pretty sick thing to have. Like drifting's pretty cool that way.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of other sports that you could just like get like welcomed into like some group on the other side of the world, you know?
Yeah. I always considered it kind of it sounds lame, but like a fraternity. Like if you're like, hey, I'm gonna be in this country, and they're like, oh, you drift, like come check out our track or whatever, you know. It's
and there's like niches within the niche too, right? And you're like, that guy gets it.
Yeah,
he's my buddy. Like you know, by default.
I like the way he enters.
Yeah,
like,
literally,
that's my friend.
100%. There's like guys on Instagram now that I would consider mates, and like I might never meet them in real life, you know, which is sick because they got a cool car and they drive good.
Yeah. You'd be like, you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, I hope that happens someday. That'd be really cool for you guys to come over. I want to come your way.
Yeah, we definitely want to have you guys back and do like another international event in New Zealand. The problem is like business. Like I said, Ruben started his own business too and is like doing really well. So he's busy as all hell. Adam, like a lot of the reason our cars, like I said, is the driving force behind the cars getting built. he got scooped up by like the movie industry. So in New Zealand, the movie industry, literally filming like Hollywood movies, like got pretty big at one point, like especially over the COVID times. And Adam ended up getting like a special effects fabrication role, and then just shredded at it. And then,
Of course.
yeah, like he does. And then some guy from Australia or the States or something that had like done like special effects for like The Dark Knight and like Mission Impossible and shit was like, this guy's good at what he does. Do you want to come to America and do the Australia and do the Mad Max movie? So then Adam went and lived in like Sydney, fabricating like all the explosions and the rigs and the things that like flip cars and literally building some of the Mad Max cars and bikes. He did that for like 12 months or 10 months. And now he's back in New Zealand. Like they just did like the latest Jason Momoa movie. And he kind of got like zoomed up the ladder in that special effects kind of space. So now that he runs a team of people.
Is he like in the credits for these movies?
Yeah, 100%. Like literally.
Does he have like an IMDb now?
Like I think he does, yeah.
So cool.
Oh, if you sit through like Furiosa, the new Mad Max,
Yeah.
sit through the credits right to the special effects, Adam's name's there.
Sick.
Which is pretty sick.
That's so cool.
I never knew until he got into the industry like that they name like everyone.
Yeah.
Like, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, there's like, I don't know how I got on that tangent, but the event thing, like like we just don't have a whole lot of time at the moment. But I think all of us know that it's a thing that we want, like, will happen, you know, once everyone's a little bit more settled with business, once everyone's like caught up on life, like there'll be another international drift event where we like have you guys fly out. We want to bring some like Casey and Noki, like that would be pretty sick.
I want to drive with Casey so bad.
Yeah, same. That's a big goal. I probably don't want to drive with him just because he'd shit all over me. But yeah,
I just want to see if I can. I don't think I can keep up.
Yeah. I never.
I want to try though.
Nah, not in a million years, dude. That guy's so fast, and out of everyone, he's like one of the fastest too. So, but like, yeah, I think doing some international stuff would be sick, and having an event in New Zealand. But I just think the stars will align eventually for both those things. Just gotta like push towards it. And I think we can make it happen for sure. Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah, it'd be sick.
Do we miss anything?
In terms, feel like we talked about me a lot. Is that what we normally do?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we covered a lot of it. Like, yeah, it's actually a lot of fun, like sitting down and chatting to you. Like I listen to a lot of these.
That's crazy.
Every time I walk into the workshop at Adams, like into his shed where he works on all the cars, he's always got like a podcast playing, which is pretty cool. Like one of yours.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
Yeah.
I
think it was the Ryan one, Carter's one.
Yeah.
Was like very well received by a lot of us. Like he was like, I don't know, super OG, like in the early days. And just like kind of hearing his story, like, you know, he kind of like fell off in terms of drifting for a while there. And just like hearing the story of like why that happened and like him just being like super like transparent and relatable with it was like super sick. Like you did a real good job of that. Like that was a good chat.
He's just super eloquent.
Yeah.
He's like I could just listen to him talk all day.
Yeah. It was cool. I got to meet him for the first time on this US trip at Thunder Hill. And same thing, like worked with him like back in the Earnest days, like with overalls, and like always looked up to him as a driver. Like he's definitely one of the drivers that I look up to strongly. And like got to meet him for the first time, and it was the same thing. Got to like just like hang out like old mates. And actually we were like, after the drift event, we were driving down the coast surfing, and there's a little town called Monterey. Probably saying that wrong, but
you got it.
Little like seaside town that's pretty rad. And I was just like sitting on a park bench, like in essentially the middle of nowhere, like just hanging out, waiting for Beth that was like looking in some shop. And Ryan just like rolled up with his family, like just like visiting the same town. So we like hung out and got ramen that night, and like got to hang out and like actually like have some good chats with him and his family, which was like really cool. So yeah, it's the US trips have been like obviously great for surfing and hanging out, but like got to see you guys drive and do some cool stuff and meet some people I've always wanted to meet. So I've had a good time.
Yeah, that's another great example of drift people,
Yeah,
small world.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a good time.
I'm so happy that happened.
Yeah,
You guys just
dude, I was-
cruise into each other.
yeah. He was like, I think he was more mind blown than I was because it's just like me sitting on a park bench in like Monterey. Like, yeah,
Is that Joel?
yeah, literally. He like, I could see it in his eyes. He was just like, what the fuck? But it was sick. And they were going for ramen anyway. And I was like, dude, that's a pretty perfect like
Yeah.
thing to do. So let's go eat some ramen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time. But no, I think we yeah, covered quite a lot of stuff. I've been going to Japan a bunch lately, like which has been like kind of like revitalized the bug for like wanting to drive better. Going over and seeing like through work, I obviously traveled to China a bunch, and then I've just figured out in the last year, I don't know why, it took me 10 years to realize this, but China's really close to Japan. I knew this, but you can fly from, Shanghai to Osaka for like $60 and it takes like an hour and a half. So every time I go and visit like my factories, I would go like
take a weekend.
Yeah,
or
and go hang out with like Kesuke from 86 Fighters. Like he's doing a lot of he's the man. Loudest laugh and drifting.
I miss that dude so much.
He's like one of the nicest, most genuine dudes, and he's been doing a lot of stuff in Japan and like with Casey, and they've really like, especially Casey's like, he's kind of established himself in terms of he's got like this really sick workshop space with Noki and Shane and like the PS Tucker guy that does all the stickers. They've like kind of gone in on this big bit of land with these workshops together, and like,
oh, interesting.
Like I can't say too much about it, but like they've got some like plans hatching, which is like really, really cool, and it feels like they've really established themselves and are establishing themselves in a way that it's like a really fun place to be now, because you're going over there and their cars are like sick and they're doing like heaps of good drift events. And I just so happen to time a bunch of my China travel, my factory travel, with like, I got to go to Kansai All Stars this year, which if you're into drifting, like, and you have one thing, international travel, that you're ever going to do, it's go to Kansai All Stars. Like, it's a one-day event. It happens once a year, and it is the gnarliest driving. Like, YouTube live stream doesn't do it justice. You have to be there. But yeah, getting to hang out with Casey, Kesuke, Shane, Noki, like Macy. You've done a podcast with Macy, I think. There's a whole bunch of like legendary guys that I met 12 years ago when I was living in Japan. I met them all. They weren't living there directly, but like I got to hang out with Jesse again this year, like, and like see how him and Akemi and their family are doing, and like just like, yeah, that has been a really cool like goal ticked off this year, is being able to like just like go hang out with people. I don't directly have the stress of the car stuff, which is nice, because I'm just like passing by.
Yeah.
But get to see them handle all the stress of all their car stuff, but I get to see them like kill it, like over there, and like they've chosen that's the place they want to spend the rest of their lives and like live their like car life over there. So it's pretty damn cool to experience all of that, because it's like super inspiring to see what some of those dudes are doing, like where Casey's at and where Jesse's at, and like where Macy's at with like his work and stuff. So like it's pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
Macy's
a good dude. I talked to him a bit.
Yeah. He's there's quite a lot of good dudes over there, but he's like definitely one of the good ones.
There's a lot of absolutely. He's very like humble and low key, but he's done some cool stuff. And like Keisuke, man, like it's like level of driving he's doing in a Hachi and like competitive drifting.
Yeah, it's cool having like Keisuke, like literally up until like 2 weeks ago, literally lived like 30 seconds away from the store that we run, West Supply. And like it's kind of weird, like having like a Japanese, like Keisuke is Japanese, but he's like grown up in New Zealand, like having someone like that that's 1, into drifting, 2, has like a Japanese like heritage, 3, drives that good and has that much passion towards it. Like it's like a pretty sick thing to have, like, and as just to have like a mate that's down the road, like it's been pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's been killing it. He did like D1NZ competition this year, which was pretty pretty rad to see him do it in an 8.6, and he won it,
Yeah.
which is nuts.
Yeah.
Obviously you guys
So proud of that guy.
yeah, sick driving. And him get like, it was the first time at All Stars I got to see him drive a silver at Mayhan, and like straight up like him, Jordan Tweedy, another Kiwi guy,
dude, yeah,
and obviously Casey, but like seeing them drive Mayhan, like it's nuts the level that those boys are at now.
Yeah.
Like I want to be at that level, but I don't think you'll ever get to that level just driving our local tracks, but like I'll sure as hell try as hard as I can,
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I think I'm a long ways away.
Yeah, but that's part of the fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think we got it.
Cool. No, thank you so much for having me. Like I said, it's cool not only getting to like visit you guys on this trip, but like I've always like we've been talking about doing this for ages.
Yeah.
But
you were either at the top or close to the top of my list since I started doing this thing.
So how long has it been?
I started it in 2020, April. So we're coming up on 5 years.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Are you gonna do anything
for the 5 years?
years?
Now that you mention it, I probably should,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
I have some pretty good podcasts lined up this year. So
Sick.
it's yeah, I don't know. I don't really like think about it very often.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've been requested heavily since day one. But I'm glad we waited this long.
Yeah, I really wanted to, doing it in person, I think
Yeah.
was a good call. I think, you can definitely get a combo flowing online, but there's probably some delay from New Zealand,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So
It worked with Keisuke because I just let him be hilarious for 2 hours, but like, you like kind of like step on each other and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'd love to do one with him in person. That's the goal. So
yeah, we'll get you out to New Zealand and you can do a bunch there at some point.
I can't wait.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be a lot of guys in New Zealand that would be frothing to jump on.
Yeah, there's a lot of great dudes
Yeah.
out there
Yeah.
that I'd love to have on the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name them all right now because
We'll make it happen.
yeah,
No,
because I'm going to forget somebody.
Yeah, you just don't start. No, but yeah, thanks so much, man. Like, I hope everyone listening. I just feel like I kind of just like talked about my childhood, but everyone just sat through me reminiscing of the better days. But yeah, like thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, to everyone that we've kind of like followed C's Garage along the way. Like I know both me and Adam are like super like appreciative of like where drifting's taken us and who we've met, and like everyone that's bought like a sticker or a t-shirt or like sent us a message or anything in the past or follows. Like it's so cool us being how deep are we, like shit, we're pretty old now, started in 2007. It's pretty cool to have people like still commenting to these days and following along with like what we do. So we really appreciate that. And yeah, here's to another 15 years of messing around with drift cars.
Yeah, I hope it never ends.
Yeah. My goal has always to be like, I want to be like a 70-year-old man and like get out of my drift car and start walking with my cane, throw down like some gnarly entry and then just like hop out and make a tea or something.
Yeah,
would be the goal.
That's I think a lot of us hope that that's the case.
Yeah. But no, it's like thanks heaps, man.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the whole episode. If you like the guest, be sure to give them a follow on social media. The link's in the description. Send them a message. Tell them you appreciated the episode. They put a lot into these. If you want to support us, check out the links below. Follow us on social media. Hit the subscribe on YouTube, Spotify. You can check out goodestco.com for the latest merch drops. Hit up the Patreon. See what we got cooking on there. We appreciate you guys.